Hey everyone, welcome back to some live pitch deck reviews. I know we've had a bit of a break, but this time of year everyone's traveling for events. So today we have Omar, as Jay is busy, unfortunately, and he's going to be reviewing the Mage Slayer. So I'll hand over to Omar.
Yay, thank you, Tom Cheese Whiz Haynes. Yeah, welcome everyone. It's great to be back. I know we've had a bit of a delay, as Tom mentioned. Various industry events, Gamescom, and with me traveling and Jay traveling, there are a lot of things that we do at this time of the year, which means sometimes we have to kind of put these shows and podcasts off for a bit until we're all available, because we are human beings. We have regular lives. But yeah, it's good to be back. It's just going to be me today with Anne from the Mage Slayer team. And wherever you are right now in the world, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's evening time here, and it's very early hours for Anne, which is why he is in the dark. He can't turn his light on. So yeah, we can get started. And I think what we'll do is kind of jump straight into it. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to take everyone through the slides, give feedback to Anne, and yeah, let's just take it as it's going. Cool. So first slide. So we've got the title slide. I've got a few comments here for you. I really like the artwork. It's quite funny because I put some comments down here, which made more sense as I read through the deck later on. I was like, oh, okay, I see why you did that. I like the color composition. You've got kind of the blue and red. It gave me very Star Wars Sith versus Jedi vibes. So there's a sense of like good versus evil, which is great. A couple of things that I think you could tweak a bit. The Mage Slayer logo, for some reason, I think it looks a little bit low res, and maybe the brightness is too high on the letters, because the way you've got the 3D effect, the extrusion effect, it's kind of a little bit washed out. And yeah, it's kind of not doing the visuals justice, in my opinion. So yeah, I think that just needs a bit more of a tweak. The reason why I say that, it does remind me of Microsoft Word art, which is not the best for making logos. But I think you can tweak the colors, and you can kind of give it a bit more definition, maybe outline the lettering, and then when you extrude it, it can kind of stand out a little bit more against the visual. You could probably reduce the size of the logo a bit as well. I think it's a bit too kind of overpowering. But then there's a few things that are missing here. So you've not got your little disclaimer on the bottom, which should say, this is private and confidential for publisher eyes only. You need to put that in on the bottom, so we know it's a very important document when it lands in our inbox. The second thing is your company logo is not here. I imagine you have one or you don't, and if you don't, maybe try and look at it.
I don't have a logo.
Okay, all right. But it would be good if you maybe just put something in, just like on the top right, very small and discreet, just so that we know this particular game is made by this developer. Because first thing I might do is just type in the Mage Slayer just to find the game. But if I know that you guys have made it, it improves my chances of finding it, and also highlights whether this is an original game or if it's sharing the same title as another game, or I don't know, another animation or movie or TV show or whatever. You just want to make it easy for me to find the game. And then, yeah, I think there's another thing, an important thing. You're missing the one-liner, which I like to see. It's just, it's usually about 5 or 6 words. It's just along the bottom, just kind of gives me a sense of what type of game this is. The reason why I say that, because it says the Mage Slayer, but I'm not seeing any mages being slayed. I don't see any of them in the background. I'm seeing the hero, who I think this is the protagonist, but I'm not seeing the environment. I'm not really getting a sense of where this is set. This could be an RPG. This could be a Souls-like. For all I know, it could be a side-on, scrolling platformer. I won't know. So you just need to add something on the bottom to just give it a bit more context. And I think you've kind of done that on the next slide, which I kind of move on to. So let's have a look at that. Okay, so this has that one liner. So a fast-paced hack and slash action adventure set in a decaying magical world. Great. I think if you could maybe shorten that a little bit, just get it onto the title page, that would really help. That would just bring it all together. Secondly, I think just looking at what you've got here, I think it would make more sense personally, if you called it an overview slide instead of the elevator pitch. I think you can add a bit more information here about the type of game you're making. The reason why I say that is because the visual is very big. It's almost too big. And then there's only, a couple of sentences underneath, and they're very vague. They don't really tell me a lot about the game. So yeah, I think you could have a smaller image. You could probably put the text like even on the left and just expand out a bit more, get like a good decent sized paragraph, which gives me a bit more information about the world, who the hero is, what are the stakes. There's a lot of things you want to try and cover at a high level, like who you are, what you're doing, why you're doing it, where are you doing it, and why. And not all of that is coming across. You say you play as an outcast. Well, what kind of an outcast? Shunned for having no magic. So you're presumably a human. You rely on your sword and skill to cut down the corrupted mage aristocracy and restore balance to the realm. Okay, there's a bit of a sense of like, okay, I'm an outcast. The bad guys are the aristocracy, and I need to take them down. But I need to know the stakes, and also like why am I doing this? What are my motivations? Just a little bit more world building. And then there's another thing as well, which is kind of not really explained. Like you say, the world is decaying. What's happening? Why is it decaying? How have the mages rose above the humans? And I think the other thing is that the first leading sentence says, it's a fast-paced hack and slash action adventure. That kind of sits at odds with the image, which is very similar to the title page image, where you have a character kind of crouched, kneeled, with a sword in his hand. You did that in the title page, and now you've done it again here. So it's almost repetition. But I'll be honest, the image on your title page is very striking, very polished. This is looking very kind of rough, very unfinished. It's not really telling me a lot. There's smoke, and there's some skeletons and corpses that have just kind of over time decayed, and that's about it. Not much more beyond that. But yeah, maybe it'll be good to just kind of hear some thoughts from you about why you picked this image.
Okay, it's because in my game we use comic pages to as a tool of storytelling, and we are trying to sketch out some frame in the comic page, and I'm trying to use those comic page into the pitch to show that how we use those frame to tell our story. So I think it's a good way to tell the publisher to how we are making and what we are making the game.
Okay, that makes more sense now. But what I would say is, if you're going to use a comic book art style, and I do have notes about that because you mentioned it later in the deck, try and present it like a comic book in that sense. If I read graphic novels, so you want to have multiple frames, maybe some bigger, some large, small, showing some kind of dynamic action. Maybe you have the mage. This is the first image. He's kind of like a moment of respite. He's done a lot of killing and he's tired. All of a sudden, a mage appears in the background. Then he's a blur. He dashes super quickly. Next panel, he's kind of like cut him in half before he can even cast his spell. Show me what kind of game this is, and show me how you're going to present story. And it might be something that you kind of briefly describe in the overview here as well. So yeah, I can understand that. I think it just makes more sense to have the images presented that way. I've seen decks before where people talk about the comic book art style, and a lot of the time, funnily enough, they don't really present anything in a comic book art style. They'll have a key image and just describe it. Comic books are very visual. Graphic novels are very visual. They do have text, but you need to explain why it's there, in not just in your own descriptions, but tell a story. To show me a moment of whether it's gameplay or narrative or whatever it may be. So yeah, I think you should put that in kind of like a story format maybe. And the other thing I was also going to say is that this is just a random question on my part, and you try and answer it later on in the deck. But I'll be honest, the first thing I thought when you say you're a human in a world you've been outcast and you're fighting mages. It feels like my chances of surviving are going to be very slim. Like, mages can cast projectiles, they can conjure all kinds of things. If they wanted to, they could just levitate me and throw me into a pit of fire. What could I do to avoid that? So just saying that, you use your sword and skill to overcome them is probably not enough. So maybe you just need to elaborate on that a bit more, because it does seem like you're fighting a losing battle, and that just isn't kind of clicking with me at the moment. So yeah, there's got to be some sense of balance, some sense of balance, is what I'm saying. Cool. Okay, I'll move on to the next slide. Right, core game pillars. Now, I don't really have anything against seeing pillars in pitch decks. It's great, but typically, like I would see them like typically in internal documents more than I would in pitch decks, because usually, like, pillars are more about like the feel of the game. What are you trying to convey to the player? And it's good to put that in a deck, but I would find that all the other accompanying slides should paint that picture anyway, and it takes away from like the value of having a pillar slide, when I think you can probably put in a key feature slide and a USP slide, because it's a proposition, right? And you can communicate a lot of your pillars through the other slides anyway. And it also just adds to the total count. So it's like, basically what I'm saying is, if I had 2 slides and I had 3 things that I wanted to communicate to a publisher, one is, the USPs, what makes it a totally unique experience, the key features, so I know how to measure it in terms of, mechanics and gameplay and what it offers. And then the third one is feel, which is pillars. And yes, they are important, but I think out of the 3, if the third one's being addressed through the other 2 slides and all the subsequent slides, I'd probably just put it down to these 2. So I think you could rename this and maybe call it like, like the X meets Y. What is this game trying to be? Because you reference other games throughout the presentation. So for me, it would be like, I'll call out the reference games in a bit, but I think, yeah, if you show me, the combat is from a particular game, so this is how you're human and you're kind of stacked against the odds. And then the next one is probably more about, this is magical world, so we're all about the enemies being, really overpowered, and how you're going to try and overcome them and tackle them. And then, something about the world itself. It's a fantasy world. It's inspired. You mentioned like certain texts and that you're inspired by. So it's a combination of those things, right? So it's the X meets Y meets Z. I think that would just make it far more appealing and easier to understand. And also, when you have like X meets Y slides, you have an opportunity to reference games that the publisher will immediately recognize. So they can, for example, like if the first one is like combat, right? You've said it's fast-paced, third-person combat, killer combos. For me, maybe there is a game that features a character like that, right? You mentioned Metal Gear Rising or Revengeance. I also thought of Samurai Jack, because Samurai Jack is a fantastic example of a character who's constantly moving through different environments and worlds. And he's often encountering, magical creatures, fantasy creatures, sci-fi characters. Like, every time it's different. And his foes will always test him in ways that he never thought before, but he overcomes them through skill and agility. So your hero is kind of like that character. And the second thing might be, the magic system. And if you've got a game that you want to reference, if you're talking about elemental components, like the way the system works, you've described this in later slides, mention that, if there's a game that uses a similar system, or maybe you're referencing, say, a show or a movie. Like for me, it was like, I saw your GIFs and I thought of Avatar, not the James Cameron movie, but the animated show, earth, water, fire, that's kind of like, yeah, that works. That makes sense. So if your game has enemies which use those kind of elemental powers to take you down, then it's like, well, I'm like Samurai Jack, and I've got to use my wits and my skill to overcome, deflect, use their abilities against them, but I'm not magical. So that would make more sense. And then maybe like the third part is, talking more about the world, for example. It's it's an explorable world. It's something you allude to later on. You know, it's an action adventure game. But I will say that that isn't coming across here, because the 3 panels you've got, they blur. Like they're very similar in ways, and they don't stand out on their own. Like there's a lot of talk about magic in all of them, and I feel like they need to be very distinct. And that's the other thing. Like pillars, if you take one away, it's like a chair with 4 legs, or even a stool with 3 legs. Take one away when you fall, right? Pillars need to hold up. So if I took out, let's say, for example, the magic and physical might, the rich versus poor, the light versus darkness, which is part of the story, you still got the other 2 there that kind of hold it up as an action game. But how much weighting do you have on story and thematic content? It's not really elaborated here, so it's quite weak and just falls. So yeah, just give that some more thought. And just presentation. Like you know, if you went with the X meets Y, you have an opportunity to reference those games, put in some really strong imagery, highlighting what you're picking from each game. But here, I'll be honest, it's like the text is tiny. You've got blue, like dark blue on top of a dark blue background. It's getting lost. It's not very easy to read. It's just kind of lost impact. So yeah, I would suggest you kind of give this another pass. I'd love to see it as an X meets Y, and then think about, you know, having a USP slide and then a feature slide, and each time at a high level you're kind of saying what the game is, why it's special. Features is talking more about the mechanics, you know, what brings those pillars to life, you know, how the game plays. So yeah, just kind of make it flow that way. Yeah, I don't really feel like there's much more I can add to this at the moment. I did have some comments about story, but maybe I'll save it. I'll save it for the later one. I've got some thoughts on that. Cool. All right, let's move on to the next one. Right. So this is kind of cool. I like seeing GIFs. And what I will say though is, I think you've jumped too quick into showing me core gameplay before you've really sold it to me as to why this game is special. So like I said previously, you know, the USPs of your game, the key features of your game. So I'll kind of talk about them first, and then we can talk about what you've presented here. So, right. There is, actually, no, you know what? I could combine the 2. So let's just describe what's here very, very, very quickly. So you've got a combat mechanic system, right, based on the 5 fundamental elements that you've defined, right? You've also put some materials in there, so you put metal in there. I thought it'd just be like earth, wind, fire, but you've got wood, you've got metal. Now you're saying that the player has to choose the right weapon or whatever in their inventory to counter an element that's being projected at them from an enemy, and it's going to be really fast, right? So you don't have magic to fight magic. You have to use your sword, your shield, or whatever at your disposal to deflect and parry, which is kind of cool. But what I noticed was that when I was looking at the visuals, firstly, the one on the right where he's kind of he's cast fire at you, it looks like I'm actually manipulating the fire. It's on my hands. It's not damaging me. It looks like I'm wielding the fire. So that confused me a little bit, because then I look like a mage. So that was one problem. The other thing was that you've said metal katana on the left image can break metal shields, but it takes time. So does that mean, it looks like in the GIF, that you have mages who are also wearing armor, who may also use similar weapons to fight you? Is that correct?
Oh yeah. Actually, it's not like wearing in a normal means, but the mage will task to make the metal shield appear, something like that. Not just he wear it normally.
Right. Okay. Okay, that kind of makes sense. So it seems like the system there is like you've got quite capable enemies that you need to take down. So I had some thoughts about this, right? So I thought, before you jump straight into describing the mechanics here, you want to talk about the USPs of your game, right? So I was thinking, like, well, one of them for me is like, you know, the ability to switch out a character build on the fly. And what I mean by that is you have weapons, you have items on you. So you've got a sword or a shield made from different materials. And you can quickly, using this system that you have, press a button or combination of buttons or however you do it, D-pad, switch between the builds and your stance, for example. You know, like Ghost of Tsushima does it. You know, there are other games like that where you have stances. So I might have my regular kind of like cloth outfit. I might have a wooden shield, and then I quickly switch out to a metal sword and a metal shield and metal armor. And you know, that's great because I'm going against a firecaster. When you cast fire, I can deflect it with my shield. The shield will absorb the heat. It takes a long time for it to get very hot. So I don't, you know, if it gets too hot, I sustain damage, but it takes a long time. So I can hold the shield, which gives me time to walk around, strafe, and then maybe, you know, ambush him and hit him with the sword. The trade-off is, oh, when I switch to metal, or if all my elements everything in my build is metal, I'm slower. The game is designed to be fast in combat, but it takes off like half a second or whatever it is. The way you guys balance and measure it, it's like, don't stay in metal too long, right? So you've got to quickly then switch to a different build when you kind of ambush him or when you want to move around and you stop casting fire to, I don't know, fabric outfit. But then you have your water bow and arrow, and then you can fire a water arrow like Breath of the Wild straight at him, and it drenches him in water. And it's like, now he can't cast fire. It's like, great. Now I've got like 3 or 4 seconds while he's drenched in water to hit him with the sword and like kill him. If I take too long, he dries it out, like he casts fire and then expels the water and he's powered up again. So that is the kind of stuff that I would find really interesting, like being able to switch a build, boom, 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 super quick. I don't press pause. I don't go into a menu. I don't choose this item. I can build my own character build, go into combat and just quickly like switch things out, like just with the button press. And that would be amazing because the character's fast, right? So it's like he's so fast he can just like put the sword back, get this out. That would be fun, you know. And there's also like other things that I was thinking of, like, yeah, if you have if you switch to fabric, it makes you super lightweight, right? You can run around really quickly. But if you catch fire, you're going to take damage. The DPS is going to be insane. So you don't want to do that. Maybe you only use it for maneuverability, you know, to ambush, run around, get behind someone, then switch out to a different build. And then, like, yeah, if you had wood, the trade-off with wood is that it's kind of tough and it won't slow you down too much, maybe a medium level of like movement. But the problem is wood will also catch fire, right? Like fabric. So then it's like, okay, I have a bit of strength, a bit more mobility, a bit more protection, but it might burn away. So yeah, I would love it. Like if you kind of define the things that are unique about your game, right? If it is this fast switching out of builds, this elemental system, call it out, right? There was another thing, and I'm kind of jumping ahead, and for the viewers who might be like, what is he talking about now? I've seen the whole deck, so I have notes. There is a mention in your game later on at some point where you talk about corruption and being, you know, corrupted. You have to make choices. I think it was on you mentioned resolution on like slide 8. So I was thinking, oh, maybe there's a system in the game where you can play it through, and whenever you have the choice to like slay one of these enemies, you know, like that kind of with Shadow of Mordor with the generals, you know, you kill them. It's like, well, what do I do now? If I just kill them, I kill them. Great. I keep moving through the story. But maybe I can have a taste of magic. Maybe I can take a bit of their magic, or it imbues me. It corrupts me. The benefit is that I can move through the story and be really more powerful. But at the same time, does it hurt me in any way? You know, does it reduce my total health bar size, you know, because I've become corrupted? Or maybe in the story, I'm kind of like this Robin Hood character, helping the people, helping the humans. They start to lose faith in me because I've become, you know, this kind of like character, or whatever it might be that you have in the game. So yeah, just think about like, yeah, if there's a morality system, how does that work? You know, if you've got this build system, how, you know, what is that? Put it into a USP slide before you even get to this. And then the other thing is there's like the features of your game. So then you need to talk about, what does the player do to interact with this world? What are the mechanics? You know, how do those play out? So, you know, combat, you said it's super fast. It'll be great to know, like, what kind of combat system is it? You know, can it be customized? You know, is it a mix of just, is it only ground-based, or is it ground-based and aerial, so I can kind of juggle enemies when I do damage, I can beat them up? You know, does it play like Ninja Gaiden Sigma? What is it like, Metal Gear Rising? Do I have the ability to manipulate my sword? Can I slice? Can I pause time? Do you think slow down? You mentioned Devil May Cry, so it's like you have a bit of juggling in that as well. So what kind of combat system is it? Give me some frames of reference. Show me GIFs and visuals that represent the combat, so then I know exactly how to place it, you know, against its competitors and where it sits in the market, who it might appeal to. And then also, like, you know, there might be other things like, oh, we have a parry system, not just with the spells that are being cast. We've got some mages who, after a while, maybe they run out of power and then they become just sword wielding enemies. You know, do you take them out like Dynasty Warriors? Can you charge multiple and just like swing and take all of them out? Or is it more like Batman, right, with the Batman games, where it's a parry system and you move between enemy types? Need to describe that. So that's just the combat, right? There are other features of your game which you briefly mentioned but don't really delve into, like there's puzzling. Okay, what kind of puzzles, right? Are they like the shrines in Breath of the Wild? Are they like environmental traps in a dungeon crawler? Like, what is it? Am I avoiding things? Am I trying to move things and solve the spatial puzzle? It would be good to describe them. And then also, like with any hack and slash game, almost any hack and slash game, you move through different types of enemies. So you have, you know, you cannon fodder at the start, the lightweights, then you have some heavies as well after the middleweights, and then you conclude with the boss. And the boss is the culmination of everything you've learned up until that point, fighting different enemy types. You know, maybe the first biome is mostly fire-themed enemies, and when you get to the boss, everything you've learned about fire, manipulating fire, it's like a fire-themed boss, right? Then the next biome is water, and then the next one is wood. And, you know, you've got 5 bosses for the 5 elements. And then maybe there's a 6th level that you don't know about, which is a combination of all the 5 before, and it's the ultimate boss to take on. So, yeah, you need to think about those additional slides, because I think jumping to this is just too early. This is more of a gameplay slide, or elements of a gameplay slide, talking about counters. So, yeah, I'd love to see those before, and just expand on those, because you've got, I didn't mention this at the start, you've got a lot of slides in your deck. What you need to do is kind of cut a number of them out, and any that drop below like 10, you know, 15 slides max, 13 is preferred. But if you drop it down to like 10, you're like, oh, okay, what would I want to talk more about? You know, maybe put a couple of slides in about mechanics and gameplay. So yeah, get those in definitely, for sure. Cool. All right. Next, we've got game loops. So this is I was going to say, it's very rare to have a game loop that flows anti-clockwise. I've never seen a game loop that goes in the opposite direction. Usually things flow in a clockwise way in diagrams. I don't know if I imagine, was it just something you're just used to presenting in that way? Like just, oh, it just makes more sense to flow left first to right. But yeah, I think you need to just kind of flip it. Because it was perplexing. I really struggled. I kept reading progress, then solve puzzles, then learn, and then earn souls, because I'm so used to seeing it in all documentation. So yeah, flip it around. The other thing I was going to say is the first thing on here is earn souls, in-game currency. So when it says earn souls, I thought, wait, hold on. I'm a human being. How does this apply to me? I can't, you know, suck souls out of enemies. So then I would have to be magical if that's the case. So that was throwing me off. It's not really been explained before. You know, why do I need to get souls? If it's just a straightforward currency, you know, maybe you slay a mage. When you slay a mage, they disappear and they I don't know, they fall to the ground and they turn into some kind of material which is of no value to mages, but to humans, it's something you can trade with, right? You know, it's like their ashes are like crystals or whatever. So you need to kind of explain that. Kind of makes sense at a very high level. So you slay enemies, you get currency, but then it's not explained what I do with the currency. What am I spending it on? Equipment and tools, but you say learn new abilities. So that throws me off. It's like, well, those abilities, how are those acquired? Is it through fighting certain enemies, exploring the world, completing quests, learning a new move set? and then moving forward, and the currency is only spent on equipment to kind of make my life easier, or maybe I spend it to, I don't know, I spend it on keys, and keys allow me to open doors, which allow me to explore dungeons or other locations. It's not clear. And then the solving the puzzles seems to happen after you learn abilities, but I wasn't sure why that happens in that way in the flow, because I might encounter puzzles as I'm moving through the story, and I might solve them at any point. So it feels a bit weird that I have to learn the abilities, and only when I've learned the abilities and acquire the currency, then I can do the puzzles, which seems to be a bit odd. And then you've got progress, the story moves forward, which kind of makes sense, and then you go back to combat again. So you go back into another region and keep moving forward. But I think the loop is a little bit vague. It's not really flowing the way I would expect, and you need to kind of expand on what the player actually does in some of these areas. Not make it too detailed, just need to kind of make it make sense. The other thing I would also say is that the three things on the bottom, I wouldn't include them, like a deep combat system. If you'd explain that in the features and USPs, you don't need to mention it here. A cost-efficient game world, I don't think you need to mention that either, because this doesn't dictate cost efficiency. It just kind of tells me what the play flow is, and I don't really have a sense of scope and scale. This, how big is this world? So yeah, I would take that out. And then last one, long-term engagement and replayability that leads to success. You don't need to mention that. It's the whole point of the core loop, is to have replayability by highlighting where the player is, where the sticky points are, where the addicting points are, and what the player is going to do. So all that underneath, I don't think you need. I think you need to talk more about what the player does, how the story moves forward, and what you achieve, what you strive to achieve, where the distractions are, where the points of focus are, and where the rewards are and how they're spent. Because at the moment, it's just not showing all those things. So yeah, that needs a bit more focus and attention. Okay, and then next slide. Oh, have I jumped ahead? Yeah, okay. Audience, first thing, this is too early. You don't need to bring this in here. This is closer towards the end when you're talking about the market and the analysis breakdown of the market. I would take it out and kind of, well, I would move it basically. And you're still talking about the game at this point. So yeah, it needs to be moved down. The other thing I was going to say is that the statement you've got on the bottom, we target action adventure games fans who care about great stories, will stick around to master the combat. Great. So your game's going to have a good balance of story and combat. But then you say something immediately after which contradicts that. The kind who play Metal Gear Rising 10 times, not for new content, but for perfect slash parry and combo, which then downplays the story aspect of it in a way. So I feel like you're saying there's no content. You're only playing this game because the combat is great and the gameplay is addicting. That might not be enough to hold it up to that level, right? It has to be phenomenal just to keep playing it. I would like to be rewarded with, you put so much emphasis on story. You've got almost 2 slides dedicated to it. So, what else is revealed the longer I play it? Do I find other people in the world on a replay who need a bit of help, for example, and, I do a quest for them? Maybe, if there's currency involved, can I spend it on other things which are locked away? On a full playthrough the first time, you can't buy everything. You need to go back and do different quests and different things, and then you can buy more items or whatever it might be. So, yeah, I would rework that or take it out. I don't think you need it. The other thing I was going to say is you don't need the motivational model. It's kind of like something taken from like a design textbook, just highlighting other. There are all kinds of like the bottle player types. There's so many. I think you can lose that. It makes sense that you've got like, you're targeting players who like third-person perspective games. They're like challenges, fast reflexes, memorizing attack patterns, memorable stories. Great. Kind of seems like you're talking about hack and slash and Souls-like games, but without having enough of those games referenced here. It's a bit weird. That it seems a bit vague. You've mentioned a few on the right. You call them favorite games. I would just call them reference games, because favorite games to me says these are games you love but don't apply to the development of this game. No, they should be games that you are inspired by or have certain components to them which you feel like, oh, if we took a bit of this and took a bit of that and put it into our game, it feels refreshing and different. So yeah, I would change and tweak that. I would also say that maybe you could do something a little bit different here. I like the X meets Y maps where you have like an array and it's like on the X-axis, where does my game sit? And on the Y-axis, where does it sit? So, you know, you could have, here's a map of action games out there, hack and slash, Souls-like. Some of these are very easy to pick up and play. Others are very hard and they're all about mastery and skill, more Souls-like. These are very story-focused. These have no story or little to no story. This is where our game sits. And you can see, you know, there are 4 or 5 other games orbiting it in that space. So players who like those kind of games will play this. But our game is not these games in these quadrants. So that always, I love them because they're very simple and easy to understand. And if you're a, you know, if you're a publisher signing games, you'll recognize, like, if there's 10 or 15 games in there, you'll recognize most of them. You're like, okay, just from that one image, I understand who might play this game. And then you can bullet point underneath, you know, what you're really trying to achieve. You know, these are, we want our game to be story focused. We want it to have, you know, memorizing attack patterns. So it's all about, you know, fast reflexes and quick combat. So yeah, I would do that. But other than that, I can't really say much more about it. It's just a bit too early, so push it later on in the deck. So next, now this is interesting. So I had to do a bit of Googling because this description here that you've got, because you say you're referencing biblical stories. I did a Google. I can't find this quote anywhere in the world. So where did you source this from, or is this original copy that you've written?
No, actually, when I say that my game story is inspired by biblical story, I just take some detail in the Bible, and then I rewrite them and take. For example, this phrase is I wrote it. I wrote it, and based on the way people write the Bible.
Okay.
Not really. I take all those story into my game, but I inspire from it.
Okay, so what you just need to be really clear about that, so it doesn't come across as something that you have actually. The way it reads, it looks like it's quoted, and the reason why I also say that is because of the imagery on the left, and you make that connection, and it can confuse people. And yeah, you don't want to do that. So what you want to do is probably use imagery that is, I think the original imagery you have that follows this, which is really nice for the character, where he's like standing in the light. It's like, cool, put that in. And then, you know, and be very clear that this is your kind of example of your own original copy. Maybe you could put this copy in that image, so it's like being said to the character from some kind of, I don't know, there's like a light source somewhere in the distance, or another character, and then it feels like, oh, these guys are writing their own copy for this world. They've got their own lore, and it all kind of ties together quite nicely. Whereas right now, the connections are a little bit all over the place, if there are any. So yeah, just be very clear about what is original copy and what isn't, and also imagery which I think takes away from the game and probably doesn't match up, because this, I thought initially, is this from the game? I wasn't sure, right? So just be careful and just give that a bit more thought. And then yeah, also the story. I think a story slide, it's quite vague here, because it's just saying, like, this is a setting, world ruled by mages, decaying under its own corruption, class struggle, societal rot, rebelling against elitism, world balance, etc. It's too vague. It's like bullet points. And story is really important. It's got to be a little bit more kind of nuanced than that. So you might want to write a blurb that kind of says, look, this is a story, this is the setting, this is the premise. We're going to talk a little bit more about what we lightly touched upon a few slides ago at the start. You know, you are this character, you're in this kind of world, these are the stakes, you know, and there are characters in this world who will help me, and those who won't. I'm also playing a character who is human, so therefore corruptible, and you make difficult choices that, you know, may lead you down a dark path or a light path, and those choices are alternate endings, right? So the game has alternate endings, different multiple endings, and that's a cool USP. So it's something you could have highlighted earlier on as well, to talk about. So yeah, just have a bit more fun with this and just expand on it a bit more. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, also maybe look at games like Dante's Inferno. I think is a good reference point. I think, you know, it's like looking at if you are taking inspiration from you know, other texts and things in the real world, and you know, saying, okay, you know, it's a source of inspiration. Look at that. Yeah, and just look at lots of other fantasy games for sure. I'll move on to the next slide because this is kind of connected to it. So this was the image I was talking about. So it says, "Zero, my child," whatever. I think you could take that phrase you wrote before, make something a bit more succinct, and put it here, and it's almost like that's what you're hearing from, you know, this character or whatever it is, this voice in the distance. That adds a bit more weight, a bit more gravitas, or maybe even the text on the top that you've written. You know, again, it's confusing. Is this original copy or have you sourced it from somewhere? It's got to be careful with that. So yeah, I think you can combine that and this into one slide. The other thing I was going to say is, again, so this is called narrative arc. I don't think you need to do the full narrative arc. I just think you need one slide just explaining the world, and then you don't need to kind of go into these specifics of this is. I had to look it up because I forgot the name of it, but it's the Gustav Freytag, the Freytag pyramid. So this is a little. I don't know a lot about writing and like, you know, I'm not a film director. I'm not a novelist, but I like how games and films have this kind of structure, which is the hero's journey, which is kind of adapted from that. And what that does is it kind of shifts the climax to a later point in the journey. But here you put it in the middle. The problem with that is you kind of peak and it rises too early, and then the falling action and resolution kind of dip off. But what you want it to do is kind of escalate like that, and then kind of tail off a little bit more subtly towards the end. So yeah, I know what you've referenced, but I think it's just too much information. I would really simplify it. Just look at the hero's journey. Just call out a few points. You don't need to tell the full ending. You don't need to kind of give the whole game away. Just tell us what the stakes are. Tell us where it's leading to. Tell us that there are multiple endings, and kind of leave it to the publisher to figure that out. Yeah, I'm also conscious of time because we're like 15 minutes away and I've still got a number of slides left to get through. But I like that kind of key art. But I will say that the illustration. The illustration doesn't match up with your title page because you've got these comic book panels. So you need to make more of a deal out of the comic book panels. And you know, maybe you even have a whole slide just talking about that as part of the art style, which we'll kind of touch on as well. So yeah, I wasn't aware it was that important, but you highlighted at the start of the review that it is. So let's talk a little bit more about how you're going to present the story as well. Like the story is going to be presented as still images in a comic book style. Might be a dynamic comic. You know, you can get those dynamic graphic novels which have, you know, moving panels, text, and like whoosh effects, but they're very static images for the most part. So yeah, give that some more thought. And yeah, I know Tom was commenting. He was like, "This is going back." I did read it, but I was waiting for the right time to mention it. It's like having a snippet of narrative as a comic book would be more appealing, as opposed to like a single large image here. Exactly, like that was from the previous slide, but I think there's things you can do visually as well. Maybe the deck could have that kind of aesthetic to it, a bit more kind of like a comic book style. Cool, right? This will be quick because you have multiple slides talking about art direction. Now, I think you just need the one slide talking about that. And because we started naturally talking about the comic book art style, it could be here where art direction is really important. You could say, look, you know, for us, it's important that our game has this kind of aesthetic, like that the world is cell shaded, a bit like the Borderlands games, and we want that to kind of creep into the storytelling, which is going to be more comic book art style as well. So I think you need some imagery to kind of show the character in the world, then show a moment where they approach a character and then it cuts to a 2D scene. So that's it. That's all you need, in my opinion. I think all the other text here that you've got, like, don't talk about your limitations and who's missing. We haven't got, you know, a technical artist and senior 3D support. So everything we're doing now is to the best of our ability. Don't need to mention that. Whatever is in here, we assume is to the best of your ability anyway, right? And you're going to make it even better. Like at this moment in time, it's to the best of your ability, but it'll get even better. So take that out. I would just talk about the visual identity and I'll talk about the inspirations. And then what you can do, what follows on from this, and I'll kind of be quite quick, is you've got like the main character, who for some reason doesn't look like the character on the main title page, I'll be honest. Looks very different. Then he looks different in the comic book panels. So you've got to work on your consistency a little bit more. But, you know, that's crad. And then you've got other characters. Again, I thought it was just a world with just mages, but there are monsters in it as well now. So this has to be mentioned earlier on. You know, you've got this flying enemy. You know, you've got this kind of mushroom type character here. Yeah, I personally feel like when there are slides in a deck which just show art without much context or explanation, they could live in an appendix, or you can just take them out entirely and maybe just use snippets of them throughout the deck. So I don't think this adds a lot of value. It also makes me question the game a bit more because you've not talked about the monsters, you've not talked about the fantasy world, the type of creatures that live in it. I only thought it was just mages, but now it's like maybe in your world mages are different. It's like they're not humanoid. You know, they can be monsters. They can be anything you imagine. They all have the ability to cast magic. So, you know, different societies of mages, for example, and they could be creepy looking, they could be evil, they could be whatever, and it's like humans have to kind of like rise up against it. And then same for this. I don't think, you know, it's some nice art in here. I really like some cool stuff, but because it's just preliminary concept art, it's flat. You know, it's a lot of them are like painted in a couple of layers, flat imagery, not a lot of shading and dimension to them. Don't really match up with the art in the game. So I think you can take these out. Don't really add a lot to the deck, I'll be honest. I'd rather see some key imagery that's kind of giving me more a sense of world building rather than seeing these individual elements which seem quite detached. There's a lot of props here, a lot of swords, gloves, things like that, but don't really do a lot to sell the experience for me. So yeah, I think you can combine all those into like one, like just have one slide actually. Sorry, let's go back. Sorry, this slide. Yeah, get the comic book panels in, talk about, you know, the type of storytelling techniques you're going to use, and then just have some images showing the character in that world. Yeah. Okay, cool. So I'm going to skip ahead again. Nice disorienting for people watching this. So market fit. First thing I'll say, make sure your games are not more than 2 years old. The reason why I say that is because once they get older than that, the data gets skewed because they're kind of like, they can almost be perceived as like legacy titles that have a long-term shelf life. Publishers will just have them as part of their portfolio. They'll be entering sales and promotions a lot more. So they'll, you know, the revenue is going to change. You know, they'll appear in different storefronts, different deals. You know, the numbers get skewed basically is what I'm saying. But if you compare it against the first, you know, 18 to 24 months, there's data there that is closer to like seeing just how those products could sell without promotion, or, you know, less promotion, and seeing them as like full price products. They're also fresh, and you know, the comparisons are more relevant at that point. Once a game's been out way too long, like I've seen decks with people putting in games that are like 10 years old, 9 years old. I'm like, that game's been out forever. Of course, it's going to do, you know, it's going to look like it's performed incredibly well. But seeing how a game's performed in its first 12 months, first 6 months, first, you know, 24 months is more indicative and telling of like how a comparison game would fare, and whether that genre is worth chasing. You know, trends. There are trends in the games industry. There are things we see that run 6 months, 4 months, longer, and then the next big fad kind of, you know, I'd say fad, not always a fad, but sometimes it can be a fad. Can kind of like appear. And yeah, and like Tom's commenting as well, like, yeah, older games have a larger gross revenue. So yeah, it makes more sense to have data. If for some reason you've got a game that's so unique and you can't find many comparison games, they're only old comparison games. Try and find data from the most recent months. But again, it might not be the most accurate because that game probably started off with an RRP of £20, and then now it's selling for like £5.99. You know, and it has been for the next 6 or 12 months. So last 6 or 12 months. So yeah, just think about that. I was also going to say, like, the games that you picked, I wasn't too sure about them because I was like, oh, these are all slightly wildly different. I can see why you picked them because of the combat system, but, you know, like Thymesia, for example, on the bottom right, it's very dark, very gory. It's got a horror label on the tag for its Steam page tags. It's also more Souls-like. You know, it's got very high production values and doesn't look like an indie game in the sense of, you know, it's like your typical indie. It's not even AAA. It's beyond AAA. Like, almost looking at it, it's like a AA. So that's higher end of the spectrum. That game had I imagine it's a substantially high budget, so it doesn't feel like the best comparison to make. You know, and also, you know, I think it sits in a different place compared to what you're making. Asturgos, I don't know how to say it, but this one is, you've called it out as like action RPG, right? So I feel like, again, it's Souls-like. It's kind of cool, but production value is a lot higher with this. You look at Dungeons of Hinterberg, great game, but it's very wholesome. Like it's like if you know, if you don't play a lot of action RPGs and they kind of turn you off because they're dark, it's like, hey, play this game. It's very cozy, and you're helping people. Yes, there's combat in there, but it's more forgiving. That's the kind of audience you're going for, which I feel is a little bit the opposite of who you're targeting. Asterigos. Oh, I didn't even read the T in the I in the middle. That's why I thought it was Asterigos. Yeah, sorry, Tom corrected me. That's what it's called. So yeah, I think you need to be a bit more selective with the games you're picking. Like even Trek to Yomi, I played. That is mostly side-on fixed camera perspective, except for the cinematic moments when they decide to move the camera into different places. It's monochromatic. It's not really fantasy. It's, you know, samurai. It is action hack and slash, but probably not the best fit. I tried to find a couple just quickly before this call. There's like Ravenlock, which I've not played, but looks cool. There's Flintlock, Siege of Dawn, which I had in my notes as well. Similar games. So yeah, just review what's out there. I like to see these types of games presented left to right, like showing me like smallest kind of like, you know, maybe the return ROI, return on investment is quite low on this game. And this is like, whoa, this is a top performer. And it, you know, I like to see developers be humble as well. You be confident, but be humble. Or maybe you sit in the middle. You say, we're going to be here, right bang in the middle. You know, our goal is to be at a minimum strong performer. We want to be better than, you know, some of the lowest performers. Our goal is to be as good as these high performers, but you know, the best win case scenario for us as a developer and a publisher is to recoup, to make some profit. Might sit here in the middle. Anything beyond that is like, okay, we've got a huge hit on our hands, and the further up on the right, the bigger the hit, to the point where you're like, oh, we're the next, you know, Hades, or we're the next Cult of the Lamb, or whatever. So yeah, probably position it in the middle, and also source your data. I don't know where you've got the sales numbers from. So, you know, if it's from like Steam Analytics, you know, VG Insights, etc., you need to link them, so I know. And then also show platforms. You know, where's that gross revenue from, and which was the leading platform? You know, that you've just got to show, like, if it's multi-platform release, just call it out. If it's only on one platform, that's going to be a problem because your game's just on Steam, right? So it might not translate. So yeah, give that some more thought as well. We've got less than 10 minutes. Let's see if I can get through the last few. This one's a quick one for me. So the community stats. I'll be honest, the numbers here for the wishlist are quite low. I don't know how long your Steam page has been up. I feel like because the numbers are quite low, I don't think you should include this slide. I think you should focus more on the things that I mentioned before to make it stand out as a unique proposition. Show me where the market potential is. Because you've not really shown anything to accompany this in terms of your own marketing efforts. Have you advertised? Have you marketed it? Have you taken it to any events? You've not got anything to support that. So this to me says the developer has not done enough in terms of outreach. The wishlist numbers are low. It's just nothing to shout about, in my opinion. I would just take it away. Now, if you said we've got 15,000 wish lists, then I'm interested. I'm like, okay, the numbers are much higher. What did they do to achieve those numbers? Where did it work for them? Have they got a TikTok? Have they got an Instagram? Or they're on Reddit? Who's playing their game? Who's wishlisting it? But because the numbers are so low, I think, yeah, I would personally take it out. Cool. Okay, next. Okay, team. So I personally would put this closer to the end. It's too early because what you need to do is talk more about the proposition and your ask. But what you've done is you started talking about the talent first. I think I personally like the flow of having the team at the end to say why they're the best people to deliver the game. I wouldn't put it in this early. But you know, let's talk about the slide anyway. There is a slide which follows this, and I will click on it because it kind of relates to it. So this is your current members. You have more people in your team. You have 8 people. You need to expand to 14. So I think this information, the current members and how many you have right now, can all be in one slide. You know, you two are like, let's say, the leads, game director, you know, yourself. You know, it's like, okay, I'm the vision keeper. Put yourselves at the top, and maybe at a high level, just like put the thumbnails in for the rest of the team. It'd be lovely to see the rest of them. You know, maybe just put their kind of like thumbnail headshots in there as well if you want. But you need to talk about what you've achieved to date here, like at a high level. When were you formed? You know, what is your experience up until this point? I know you talk about it in a later slide, and that's great, but talking about it here just kind of like solidifies that. It's almost just telling me straight away. It's like, where are you? You know, we're in Vietnam. Great. Is your whole team there? Are you, or are you a mix of remote? I need to know as a publisher, because in this day and age, we have become more remote working, but we also need to get a sense of like time zones. Do we need to wake up at a different time to work with you guys? Is it going to be like 3 a.m. for you when you need to wake up for a call with the publisher? So yeah, call that out, and also just highlight your own achievements. Like you said, you're in 6 years in the games industry. What have you worked on? Same for your art director, 8 years. Like just thumbnails, mentions of those games. I know you do it later on. I'll just kind of skip ahead to like, yeah, you've got games we made together, but who did you make them with? Were you collectively as a team of like 8 people at a previous studio? Yeah, so this needs, if you can get it onto that team slide just along the bottom, maybe like just listing logos of games and just kind of like linking out to them, great. I like the fact that you put some numbers in, like the downloads for, you know, Shadow Slayer are really impressive. The gross revenue is pretty good for Legendary Hoplite. So yeah, just try and consolidate it into one slide. If you can't, a separate slide just on its own, just talking about the games and who worked on them, and you know, how working on those games has given you the skill set and experience to make your own hack and slash game, for example, right? So yeah, try and consolidate, make them into one if you can. The other thing I was going to say is this team slide where you've got your hiring plan. I think you can take this out of here. I would put it onto the slide which follows, which is going to be your ask, and I guess we can jump ahead to that. So skip ahead again. Oh, that's automatically started playing. It'll be further ahead actually, so we'll talk about that. But before we get to it, you've got this roadmap. But yeah, the roadmap is quite good. I quite like it. There's the way you've presented it is really nice. It does seem like you need 2 years to make the game. There's a couple of things I've got in here in my notes about, you know, what you need to do. You need to just put your alpha, beta, release candidate markers in, so I know when those hit. You know, from Q4 2025 to Q2 2027 is a very long period of time, right? It's a year and a half at least. I need to see when you're going to hit alpha, when you're going to hit beta. Are there any industry events? Is there anything you need to achieve, you know, at a certain point during that development cycle? That section needs to be like bigger, should kind of show me a bit more information in that sense. The other thing I wasn't sure about, you've got post-launch for like 3 months after Q4 2027 almost. You've not said what you're going to do. I think you could take that out. I mean, you're going to have a period of time with the publisher after anyway, where they'll be looking at how the game's performing, and you'll be planning what you think could be released content. If there's nothing planned now, I wouldn't put it in. I would take it out, because otherwise it also makes it look like this game is going to take development up to 2028, which is very scary. You don't want a game to take that long to make. So yeah, I would take that out, and I would just expand on the production. The other thing I would also say is something I noticed in the vertical slice demo. You said everything's in place, no unknowns. I put a little smiley face in my notes. I was like, there will be unknowns. They will appear during production. So it looks all perfect right now, but then you'll have lots of unknowns during development. So yeah, I think, yeah, just tweak that. But other than that, it's great. It's really nice, very clean, very easy to read. So yeah, just get some of those markers in and maybe just take that out. But yeah, that's good stuff. I know I jumped straight into this, but I was hoping to like go to the team breakdown. So yeah, you've got some numbers here. I think what you could do is you can make this look more like a chart, like a pie chart. Put some percentages in, and then on the left, you know, just maybe list out like, we need these people to make it a team of, I think it's 14 or however many in your core team of 8. We need these additional people. the way I would do it, I would just say like salary by discipline. So if it's a pie chart, you might have 90,000 for design. You might have 130,000 for coding, for example. You've got whatever thousand for outsourcing, whatever thousand for software and licensing. You don't need to be so specific as to say you need Photoshop. That's too detailed. Keep it quite high level. So how much is going to go towards software and licensing? How much for having an office space? How much for physical hardware? And admin, and you've got contingency in there. That's kind of good. So yeah, I would take all this, just make it more visual, and then what you want is a link to an Excel file, which if you click that goes into a lot of detail, like monthly breakdown of like where the spend is going, when you need those key hires, those specific salaries for those people. But yeah, so it just needs a bit more work in terms of layout. And I think what you could do, if you're very good at this, and most people can, once they have the chart, say on the right, and they highlight with a few bullet points who they need to hire, you can bullet point underneath what you need from a publisher. So you need 362K to finish your game, right? For over the course of 2 years for production and polish. Well, just say funding for development. But you need to highlight what else you need. Like, do you need marketing help? Do you need QA localization help? Porting. Do you have plans to port? This is quite an expensive game just for PC. I would just say that. So, the publisher will look at this and say, well, do we put more in, or does developer, can they make some let's tweak some numbers? Do they need this many people to make this game? Can we make it a bit more reasonable? Is there space to get porting in, or do we think no, this game's amazing, we'll throw way more in, we'll get it onto Switch and Xbox, etc. So yeah, you need to kind of address that. It's not obvious. I think those things are kind of missing. Then, is there anything else here? You don't have any internal. I had some notes here. I'm misreading my own notes. I think it was just towards the end, just before the call, I wrote something. But yeah, I think if you can get those listed, that would really help. Oh yeah, sorry, you don't have any internal design production assistants. Yes, in the sense that you don't have producers listed in your hiring list. You've got just developers. So that means you need a producer to manage your project, one or more at least, right? So specify what you need from a publisher, right? It's not just funding. You need help with marketing. You need to bring it to market. But you're going to be a big team. It's the first time you're working together. You will need a producer to help you. You may need multiple. It's just highlight all the things you need. Maybe there are some creative differences right now, and you're not 100% there with the vision. And you're like, well, could you give us some outside design support? Or does the publisher have any designers in-house who could help us? It's not that common, but they can do. But yeah, reach out for those reasons as well. And then, we're just like a few minutes over. I think what you need to do just before the end here is, yeah, you put the team slides in. That's what I was talking about. So you've got your ask, you've talked about the market, and then you put your team slides in. But it's a bit odd that when I got to the end of it, there was a giant YouTube button, and I clicked on that, and your face is glowing red now because of the thumbnail. But yeah, I think I clicked this, right? It took me to your YouTube page, and I pressed play on the first video clip, and dude, this looks great. What's funny is that this is not coming across in the deck at all. Like, that is really nice, fast combat. You've got it's like they call it tete, I think, in Japanese. You like kind of like you do a slice and then you wait and then something just slides off. This is not in a trailer. There is no footage of it in the game. The camera's wobbling. It's really dynamic. It looks great. So my notes were like, if you went back to the beginning of the where is it gone? The presentation. Let's go back to the first slide. Let's go here. Right. The elevator pitch. So if this is the overview slide, you have the little description about the game. You should have a thumbnail for a trailer at that point. You click it and you see the game. And if I only had to look at a few slides at the start and I was like, this excites me, I'll keep reading. So it feels odd that you put all that material at the end. I think you need to try and cut a trailer together, put it in on this slide if you can. That would be great. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I know we're kind of like just over an hour, but said a lot there. And it ended on a high, which is good because people can see your game now. They know where to go. So yeah, I hope they wishlist it as well. But no, that looked great. So you just need to build up on that, right? Cool. Okay, I'm gonna let Tom jump in now because that's the end of the review.
Well, I can honestly say I've already wishlisted.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
Because, while Omar was going through the deck and everything, I was on the Steam page. I was like, "Ooh, I would so play the hell out of this."
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely, I've wishlisted it. So yeah, it'd be awesome to see how this one turns out. So thank you ever so much to Omar and to Anne for agreeing to do this and submitting his deck. Just a reminder, we do have another review this week, Thursday, in our Discord. It's scrolling along the bottom there. 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern. Let me try and work that out. 7 till 8 UK time. I know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tom and I, we're Brits. We're in the UK, so we don't pay attention to other time zones as much as we should.
Well, I've my laptop's running at my PC and my laptop. The clock's set to Eastern time. My phone and my watch
Except
UK
Eastern time. We need that IGB. Yeah.
So yeah, but yeah. Thank you both so much, and we look forward to seeing you very soon.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. I look forward to the next one.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Omar. Thank you, Tom.
All right, thanks, Dan. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.